Good afternoon. I'm TJ Rogers. I'm from Accurate Controls, and we're a system integrator, original manufacturer of detention security automation systems for the corrections industry. Just a real quick little background on who we are. We actually started in 1982, and as Tony said, we've done over 500 correctional facilities in the corrections market over the last 29 years. And typically we keep about approximately 60 projects in-house of some element of manufacturing, engineering, software development, or project management. And our philosophy with Accurate Controls is we only utilize non-proprietary equipment and software to produce your system. And to date, we've done projects in everything in red, so we do projects pretty much across the nation, including Hawaii, and we've actually worked in some foreign countries. So we see a lot of what is being done across the country from different technologies, different implementations, concerns with how to manage various populations. So, correctional news, as Joe pointed out earlier, the corrections industry is shrinking, and as you'll see, Accurate Controls is one of the top integrators in the industry and has been for approximately the last 7 years, and we've been recognized for about 17 of those. That is your whole industry. That's all the people that do security electronics, and that's a small number as compared to 9 years ago. And it's something that we have to be concerned about and what I'd like to talk to you about today. So what is a security automation system? For some of you that run in jail, you hear it, but what is it? So it's a security automation system is comprised of multiple systems, but also software. So the software that most integrators use in the corrections market is what is called the SCADA software. And that's synonymous with Wonderware and Indusoft. It's a building tool. It's similar to an Excel spreadsheet. It's what integrators use to create the application, your custom application to control your jail. Okay? So that's what it is. The next thing you have are network switching equipment and computers. So some of the systems that you might see would be Cisco and HP or Dell. And that would be your network switches and your computer hardware. Okay? The next thing, your PLC. What a PLC stands for is Programmable Logic Controller. That's the backbone that controls the doors, monitors the doors, maybe controls the lights, things along those lines. Some of the manufacturers that are most commonly used in the corrections market are Schneider Electric, which is Modicon, Omron, and GE. Okay? Next, your audio system. There's basically two routes you can go when you're selecting an audio system. You can go with what is called an analog approach, and that's technology that's been used for 50 years. It's analog. It's actual voltage that is switched between audio devices to a master station, and that's how you talk across it. It's antiquated? Not really. It's actually very reliable technology, but it comes with some sacrifices. For example, features and quality. So those are some things you may want to consider as you build new facilities. The next type of system would be considered digital. Okay? The three manufacturers that offer a digital solution would be Geron, Stenophone, and Harding Instruments. The most widely used system is actually Harding Instruments in the corrections market. This is an IP-based system or digital in a digital intercom, but it offers a lot of features that you may want to consider in your application. For example, telephone paging systems, sound threshold monitoring, things like that. So that's audio systems. Next would be CCTV, or what is now known as video management systems. And there's a wide number of manufacturers that are typically seen in the corrections market. The most widely used would probably be Bosch and or Genetec or OnSSI are most widely or commonly used. a question that you may ask if you're building your new facility is to your IT manager that runs your county, what kind of facility or what kind of system do we standardize on, okay? A lot of IT managers are going to ask that you use what they've used in other buildings, right? So the next question is that system, does it work for the application that we have? Because you're going to automate video, right? So some of these systems do not work well in an automation system. They don't call it video, they don't multicast well. So those are some of the things you want to talk to your IT managers about early, so that you can help your consultant and guide him through that. Another thing to consider when you're standardizing on a certain product is, will that product be cost effective as well? Next, access control. There's a wide number of systems out there to choose from, and access control is just that. It's card readers, and that system also integrates into your overall security management system to provide local control and automate the door process. And that's something that you probably also have a standard on, potentially, so that's something to also talk to your maintenance and IT managers about. So, those are the systems that comprise the security automation system. And one of the things that a county, or you've heard about, is a non-proprietary approach. It seems that everybody markets one, so what does this really mean to you? Well, there are two aspects to consider. There's a hardware aspect and a software aspect. Most everyone in the corrections market offers a non-proprietary hardware solution. Most everybody, but not all. The next thing to consider is the software. The software can be a different story, okay? And this is the biggest hook and something that I think is important for you to consider when you're building a new facility or buying a new system for an existing facility. So, two things to consider. The specified system, the first thing that you may want to consider is what's the definition of a non-proprietary software approach. Our definition is the specified system should allow anybody that has the development license the ability to modify that software. Okay, so what does that mean? So I have a Wonderware or IndySoft development license. I build a system. And say there's some service that wants to happen at the facility and they want to choose somebody else. And Joel has an IndySoft or Wonderware development license. If he takes the software and he puts it on his development license, he should have the ability to open that software, to see the logic, and to modify that logic. That's what we're talking about when it comes to non-proprietary software. So anybody with a development license should have the ability to service, open, and upgrade and change that logic. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? So, the corrections industry. Let's talk about it for a second. This is a company that markets, I took this right off their website. It says, the system design and configuration is software-driven and inherent on-site modifications capability will keep you in control. So you would think that's non-proprietary in nature, right? We got a call from the customer, or one of their customers, that said, we would like you to add to the system. So we got the software, and we put it in our Wonderware system, or development license, and we couldn't open it. And it was a Wonderware developed system, okay? So we sent the software to Wonderware, and Wonderware couldn't open it either. And Wonderware said, well, the file where all the logic is actually in a program that is called rxdriver.exe, and that was written by a company called Trentech. So the only company that could open and change that software was Trentech, okay? So what did the county do? Well, the county paid us to redevelop the entire application at a considerable amount and then add to it, okay? So that's, that's something to consider. Here's another example. In their literature, they say non-proprietary, industry standard wonderware software. So you'd read this marketing literature and you would go, that's non-proprietary, because they say it, right? Well, another job came along. They called us and said, we'd like you to add to the system. So we got the logic and we tried to load it into our non-proprietary Wonderware development license, and we couldn't work with it. So we sent it to Wonderware, and Wonderware tried to open it as well. And they wrote this really nice letter that said the file found in your customer's Wonderware application was not developed or provided by Wonderware. It was actually mcs.dll, okay? So the only company that could open that was a company called Metroplex, okay? We couldn't modify it at all. So another example, and this is a company that also markets off the shelf, can easily be modified, okay? You can choose multiple sources for service, not proprietary, right? You'd think that, okay? So in their marketing literature, they also have a thing called a trademark here. And what does this mean? And actually, I'm going to make an example of the guys at CCI, because that was a project they were trying to figure out, what does that mean? Are we getting a non-proprietary approach? So Joe Hoffman asked the question, and he said, will you turn over the source code to this company? And they said, yeah, we don't have a problem turning over the source code as long as the owner would sign a waiver not to sell it, distribute it, or share the intellectual property. So if you sign a waiver that says you can't share it or distribute it, how do you get anybody else to service it? Okay? So that's obviously a concern if you're an owner of a facility and you would like to get maybe somebody else to service it. Okay? How do you manage that if you're not allowed to share it? Okay? So that's something else to consider it. Now, how does that company program their system? Well, in a spec, you might have the opportunity to read a spec, and the problem with specifications is there's a lot of technical information there that a person that doesn't develop these systems may have an issue really disseminating what is it really saying. Okay, so this specification says pretty easily, okay, says non-proprietary software. Then, later on in the specification, it says it will allow sophisticated customization and Microsoft ActiveX Control and .NET controls integration. Okay, so if you're not a computer programmer, what the heck does that mean? Well, what that specification says is we want you to use Wonderware, but we're allowing the system to be proprietarized and be a compiled file, okay? So again, when you compile a file, you essentially encrypt it. So if you don't have the original file that software is created in, you can't do anything with it. So the only thing you can do is, as an owner, is recreate it if you want to choose another source for service and upgrades there. Does that make sense? So, this is a good example of how our industry looks at integration. And this was an advertisement that was run in Correctional News several years ago. And it's a good example of this, of the mentality of our industry. And down in the bottom right-hand or left-hand corner, right-hand corner, in the bottom, it says something really important. It says advanced integration is proprietary, deal with it. So I like to use this because this is a good example of how our industry really looks at this question of service, non-proprietary. They say one thing, but then the reality is the industry really thinks, well, it's proprietary, just deal with it. This is what you have to do. Now, the interesting part about this is this company is part of one of the groups that recently has had issues and has left the industry. So if you would have gotten one of their systems, and they are proprietary, how do you service it if they're no longer there and it's completely proprietarized? Well, you're probably going to have to hire somebody to redevelop the entire system, whether that system's 2 years old, 5 years old, or 10 years old. And that's the reality of it. So if you're building a new facility, you may want to consider, how do I avoid this, right? So how do you avoid getting put in a situation where you may or may not have the ability to service it or get other means to service? Or how do you get a non-proprietary approach? So the first thing you do is, in the pre-qualification process, you ask a question: can you provide me a flow chart of how your software works and where all the logic resides? Okay? So that's one way to do it. If you see that they program things in a .dll, a .exe, a .net file extension where the logic exists, you may want to not consider that approach. Another thing you would require in your specification is that all control and login logic is within what is called an IODA server within the SCADA package or Wonderware or Indusoft. Okay? Does that make sense? And then at the end of this, the system integrator should turn over all the programming passwords, all of the programs, and all the schedules, and they turn it over to you, and then you actually have that authenticated. Okay, so like we did, we sent it to Wonderware or we sent it to Indusoft, and it's authenticated that they can actually open it in their development package. Yes, sir?
I have a question. It's interesting you just brought that up. How would the architects or the CMs or the owners make sure they were going to get the specs correct for non-proprietary? Well, one of the your prequal for electronics answers all of those. If you answer all those questions on the pre-qualification that gets sent out, you'll be able to have the answers. Right?
Correct. So what Joe's talking about is the pre-qualification that Pauly JL recommends has the question to the integrator: do you program with a proprietary approach? And it's okay if you want to choose that, but you're going to find out if that company has a track record of doing things with the proprietary nature of it. Okay? And you can choose at that point, is that a path that we want to go down or not? So thanks, Joe. Then one of the other things we recommend is that as part of the integration package, to turn over a development license to the owner in their name. So they would actually get the development license, the Wonderware Indusoft development license, and that they would have the software actually loaded all on there. They can see it. In addition to that is actually train maybe one of their representatives and show them where all that logic resides and how to modify it and how to work with it. That's something that we do with a lot of our customers, and it's been very successful. And a lot of the customers are very happy knowing that they don't have they have options for service. So that's what we recommend if you want a non-proprietary approach. And again, that's how we do it. Another thing that the guys at Pauly JL have come up with is an actual bond. So we provide a bond to these projects that allow us that they hold, and they maintain that bond until the project's done and the source codes are turned over and the authentication process is completed, and then the bond's finalized at that point in time. And if things are created in a proprietary approach or a proprietary way, you guys they have the resources to have it redeveloped at the cost of that particular integrator. So that's how you avoid getting a proprietary approach, and it's something that you may want to consider as you build a project. Anybody have any questions in regard to this really fun software stuff? If you're not a computer person, any questions? Okay. Some of the other things that we've been working on earlier in the day today, Mike gave a presentation about modular building. One of the things that we worked on is how to modularize the security electronics within the cells. So when we traditionally build a correctional facility, the first thing, and let's take the steel cell approach as an example. Okay, so when you build a facility, you buy the steel cells. The cells are built and then delivered to the project site. They're set in place. While that's happening, the whole entire building is being built, including an equipment room. And once that equipment room's built and the building's all being built, you're installing conduit, and you have to run conduit, one conduit for each door, one conduit for each intercom, and you're running that to all the cells. Then once the conduit's done, you have to install all the cable. So the cable's being installed, and once that finally gets installed and all done, then you can mount the field devices. So you get the field devices all installed, and that takes a long time as well. And then once you get all that done, the security equipment room's finally done, and it's conditioned and it's cleaned. And then we can finally mount the equipment racks and terminate all the wires from the field inside those security equipment rooms. And that takes forever. Any construction managers here, and you guys know, if you've ever built a jail, the security electronics guys are the last guys on the site, for the most part. And they're the last guy terminating stuff because we need a clean environment, okay? So once all that finally gets done, we can set our equipment room, our operator control stations, and we can finally start the system and test it. Takes a long time. Takes a lot of time to coordinate all the conduit, all the wire cable, all the devices. Just takes a lot of time. So a couple of years ago, we were at a project site trying to get it in budget in 2008, 2009, and the electrical contractor said, well, I could probably get my scope of work in budget if we didn't have to run all the conduit and all the cable for all the security devices. And Pauly Jail, Mike, and I kind of looked at each other and said, well, why don't we just factory install it? So we worked together to come up with a plan to factory install all of the equipment. So what we do at Steel Cell's plant is they manufacture the cell like they normally would do, and then we install a box on the back of the cell, and then we factory install the conduit and cable and the field devices. Okay, so it's all factory installed, all completed. Then what we do is deliver that same cell to a project site. It's delivered and set in place. It's already all done. It's already all completed. And then as the building gets built, the equipment room is finally done, your electrical contractor runs one conduit and one set of cables to the first cell. And the system's done. So it eliminates all that time, effort, cost of installing all those particular components. Then the control room's finalized, and then we can finally start up the system. So that's what it looks like. So Mike showed you a couple of pictures. So the cell shows up on a truck, and it's delivered and set in place. And on the back of the cell, that's how the back of the cell would look as it's installed, initially installed with all the plumbing and all the HVAC pipes. And it's all the conduit and all the wire cabling is all done. And all the cabling is pre-connectorized. So we simply just have an equipment cabinet on the back of each cell, and it's a Molex connector that you simply plug in, a wiring harness. You just plug it in and it's done. So you've installed all your head-end equipment in a fraction of the time. So that's kind of what it looks like. So you have a couple of projects that we've already done. Some of the guys that we've done it for are here. Adams County in Indiana was a project that the guys at CCI managed. We're doing McLean County right now. So we typically configure, we have the upper cell connect to the lower cell, and then we just link them all together. Okay, so it really works well. And I'm going to jump right into this. So when we first started doing this, we were hoping for about a $1,500 to $2,500 per cell savings. Okay, and what we found out, and that is the case, but we found out more recently, again, with the availability to labor and the amount of construction work that's currently going on in the industry, we're finding that we're seeing a dramatic increase in the amount of savings. Recently, we did a project in Clinton County, Iowa, which is by the Quad Cities. They only had 2 electrical contractors that bid the job. And the Low Electrical, who did a lot of time studying this application and how it would work, worked with the guys at Pauly Jail, and figured out, okay, this is going to save me a lot of time. He bid the job, he was significantly lower. And in his post-bid interview, it was determined that he figured that it was about, compared to the second place guy, a little over a $4,500 per cell savings for each cell. So a significant decrease from the budgetary cost of it. McLean County, the guys at River City Construction, they determined that it was a little over $3,800 per cell in savings in the electrical package. And recently, Paulding County Jail, which is a job down in Georgia, the electrical contractor there determined a little over $3,200 per cell savings. So significant savings as a result of modularizing the wire cable inside the cell. And that's something that Mike does. So it's a really neat product that really eliminates a lot of cost. And some of the things we learned through going through this process of doing these projects is there's a lot of benefits. So there's a scheduling benefit. So you have a lot of reduced schedule. So you don't have your electrical contractor run all that conduit and then going back in and run all that cable. But one of the biggest factors that we found, I'll jump right down to the bottom, is the equipment rooms are smaller because you don't have as many cabinets inside your equipment room and you don't have as much air conditioning requirements. But one of the biggest factors we had with this is actually the cell itself is locked and secured during construction. So normally in construction, when you have those cells, they become storage rooms for all the contractors. So you have people potentially damaging the inside of that cell. You have people possibly using the combi unit before they're necessarily connected. And the biggest issue is actually having contraband that gets left in that cell at the end of construction, which takes a lot of time to shake down that building and make sure it's secured and nothing is left behind. So those are some of the factors that we had learned through this process, and it saved the owners a lot of time in shaking those things down and being able to keep those cells finished and new. There's an example of a project a couple of states away. They've been trying to shake down the cells for, 6 months or a year? That project in that big state prison project. It's been about 30 months they've been shaking it down, trying to get all the contraband and all the things left over in all the cells cleaned up. So it's been a long process, and it can take some time, and things can get damaged in there. And then the other thing we learned by this process is all those modular cabinets are built the exact same way. So there's an example of an issue actually at Adams County where Pauly Jail's door hardware guy was there fixing, adjusting one door. And they said, we're having an issue with this. So his guy was actually worked with the maintenance person. They pulled that backplane out. They put a new backplane in. They re-terminated it, started that particular component up, and the system was changed out and done. And it took a matter of a couple of minutes to get that done. So you have a lot of maintenance things that you can achieve with these, and it just makes the process a whole lot easier and faster for your maintenance group as well. So that's the modular control system. It may be something you want to consider in the times of tight budgets and things like that, and to alleviate some cost and increase some productivity. So that's the modular approach. Another thing we're seeing in the corrections industry right now, a lot of people are asking for this, is multi-touch technology. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, everybody's got a smartphone, right? So multi-technology is just based around that, where you can zoom in, zoom out, and swipe between your screens. Anybody that's run a jail, right, the traditional approach is you have a screen that's set up and you switch between the different screens to navigate around a facility. And that can take some time. With multi-touch, you can actually swipe and zoom, and I'll show you that in just a second. So that's what it is. We actually developed this in conjunction with the state of Iowa, who wanted a non-proprietary approach in multi-touch technology. So we actually worked with Indy to bring this to the market. So they were the first place it was implemented was in Iowa at one of their state prisons there. And the thing that this approach does from a development perspective is your developer, your system integrator, us, is it allows us not to spend a ton of time trying to break up those screens and get it to be what you want. So we can adjust the screens on the fly and adjust them very quickly. So if you have a screen that maybe has too many things or you'd like to consolidate it, we can quickly do that. It makes the development a lot easier. So this is what multi-touch is. So it allows you to zoom and pan around your housing unit. For operators that manage a housing unit, you may want to be able to see the whole housing unit and see how many doors are secure or unsecure in your housing, all of your housing units from one particular location. So it gives you the ability to zoom in and zoom out pretty quickly and pan and zoom around your facility. So this may be a technology you want to consider for your operator interfaces as you go through that. So that's multi-touch. And probably the biggest thing in corrections right now is metadata. Okay, so what is metadata? Metadata is video analytics, okay? And when your IT person comes to you and says, I want to make sure I can do video analytics with my video management system, this is what they're talking about, okay? So what does that mean? So we're trying to take video and take certain events and we're trying to program the system and build in intelligence into our video so that we can give you alarms or alerts when, however you want them. So some of the events that we're working on is different events for the officers to streamline their operations. So one of the things we have is an event in maybe a busy sally port where when the person walks up to the door, it automatically calls the officer and says, unlock the door, okay? So this may be something you want in a busy sally port, or maybe when a vehicle pulls up, the delivery person pulls up to the back door, you may want to know that so you can send your officer up there right away instead of having them wait and be sitting at that door or that back gate. So you can say, oh, the truck's here, go get it. Maybe something you want to consider. Another thing to consider here is, are people moving too fast? Running in a day room, for example. We had a facility recently that wanted to know if they could do that. So the rule is they don't want you running in a day room, right? Running at all. Well, what happens when people are running in a day room? Well, it could be a fight, right? It could be a fight breaking out. Well, maybe you want to know that more quickly, and the systems could automatically tell you if something's moving too fast inside of a day room, right? So if maybe it's just as simple as somebody's running and they're not allowed to run in the day room, or maybe it's something like a fight in this situation. So that may be something to consider as you're developing your system, okay? Another possible thing you may want to consider is in your parking lot. Maybe there's a person walking from car to car, and maybe that's an event you want to consider and have an automatic alarm. So you don't have a person watching. Is there a person out there walking from car to car, checking out what's in those vehicles or whatnot? So we could actually have an alarm that is developed with a person tracking from vehicle to vehicle. So I guess my point is the difficult part about video analytics, because we see it in almost every specification, is what kind of things or what kind of events would you like to display on your system, okay? So these are some of the things that we'd like you to think about in the development part of it and say, hey, we think in our day room, we're going to want to know if objects are moving too fast. Well, to do that, we need to make sure the cameras are situated in certain areas, or maybe an object's left behind in, say, your visitation area. Well, why would something be left, in your front door? Somebody leaves a backpack in there. You may want to know that. Okay, so those are the events that you may want to consider as you're developing your new systems or your new facility when you're talking about video management, because a lot of the new systems have the ability to provide a lot of information to you. So that might be something you may want to consider as well. So that's the end of my presentation. So are there any questions?
Given the state of security electronic industry, how can a county get an aging electronic security system replaced? Do they hire a consultant?
Okay, so that's a great question. So you're an owner, you have a facility that was built in 1995, and you need the system upgraded and replaced. How do you go about doing that? And how do you avoid some of these pitfalls? So I think the answer to that is first, getting a consultant to, or in some cases, or both, a construction manager to help navigate some of these questions and develop the RFP that is developed perhaps with a non-proprietary approach. In addition to that is really getting somebody with the experience to navigate the pre-qualification and the interview process, so you can be guaranteed you get a system that meets your requirements, meets your time frame, and that the integrator or company that's implementing it has the ability to actually provide the system in the implementation within the time frame that you need it developed in. So hopefully that answers the question. All right, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
The tracking software that you just showed, is that something where if you have a pod of 50 inmates, can you pick one particular inmate to track, or is it more of a...
That's a good question. So we've been working with Bosch to track colors. Okay, so you could take, let's say you have, I don't know if you can do this, but we're doing it with an officer for watch tour. We're creating this right now where it tracks an officer inside the day room, and so it can track where they go to and if they hit certain spots. So that might be one way to do it. Another way to do it is actually tracking an inmate's colored uniform, for example, orange versus brown or green. So you can track based around color, but not individual. So in this case, they're just looking for objects moving too fast. That's all they're looking for. Okay? But that's a great question. Hopefully someday we'll be able to do that. So thank you. That's a great question. Yes, sir.
You gave us the electrical cost savings for modularizing the system. About what does it cost you to install those modular components in the factory?
That's really a question for Mike, but I'll try to put words in his mouth and answer that. So that is the answer to that question. It's about that's the net savings. Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Thanks, Bob, for answering that question. The net savings was $4,500 in Clinton County. Yeah, good thing Mike didn't have to answer it.
All right. Let's
Thank
give
you.
DJ a hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much.